So for those of you who are just tuning in, this is a class on auditioning and acting. To be specific, layered acting, or what I've been calling doing two things at the same time. And we watch videos. We watch video clips from movies. So, gather around, kiddies. It's story time. I'm going to tell you two stories about auditions. The first one. I went to drama school, and I was studying writing, but there were all these actors around. And the actors, the third-year actors, when they were ready to leave the program and go out into the world, they did these things called league auditions. And this was when they got together with the graduating class of two other acting programs, and they got a space in New York City, and they invited agents and casting directors to come and watch them perform. And these auditions were their best chance to get an agent, and you have to have an agent. And when they had done these auditions in New York, they came back to the school and they performed what they had just done in New York for everybody to see. And I remember one, this young actor, this young woman, who was very talented. She was one of the best in her class. But I watched what she did for her audition, and I was just stunned. I was flummoxed because it was so bad. First, in order to explain to you who this person was as a performer, at least as I saw it, I need to tell you what she had been doing in drama school. She had specialized in basically two kinds of roles. One, a tough cookie, a brassy dame with a heart of gold who knows how to fight if she has to, but still holds on to a few of her hopes and dreams, which she knows will never come true. The other main kind of part that she really excelled in was kind of harder to explain. Let's say a simple child, a natural child, basically a weirdo or a freak, an outcast, who nonetheless has some real insight into something ineffable on the other side, very often a poet, and doesn't know it. What these two character types have in common is that humanity has been very cruel to them, but they haven't turned bad. They're cliche parts, but when she did them, they felt brand new. And this is, absolute gold to directors, producers, and writers. That stuff is not what she chose to do for her audition. She chose a scene from a play called Les Liaisons Dangereuses, and she chose a scene from a play called Bug. First, Les Liaisons Dangereuses was made into a very famous movie in the late 80s, starring John Malkovich and Michelle Pfeiffer and Glenn Close. And this acquaintance of mine chose to play the Glenn Close role. Glenn Close plays a very tightly controlled woman who is, in her own words, a master of deceit. She never lets her true emotions show. She is a very ruthless and powerful general in what they used to call the War of the Sexes. And all of this at a time when people were already highly artificial. Ancien Regime France. The second scene, the play Bug. Ashley Judd plays a woman who's already on the fringes of society, who falls in with a mentally unbalanced Iraq war vet. And instead of helping him, she tumbles headlong into his rabbit hole of madness and conspiracy and, let's just say, the call of the void. The reason this acquaintance of mine chose these two parts was because she was hoping to showcase her range. That's not the way it worked out. She didn't show her range, she just showed that she could be bad in two different ways. You can't show your range showing two sides. What she really needed to be doing was to show at least four sides. Two sides for each of the two different parts. When she played the character from Les Liaisons Dangereuses, all she showed was the tight control, nothing that was going on underneath. When she played the character from Bug, all she showed was the wild-eyed insanity and the total lack of control. With the character who is suffering from, let's say, delusions, you have to show that this character really does believe whatever it is they're saying. At least for the character, it's all completely logical.
Guess I'd rather talk with you about bugs than nothing with nobody.
The tightly controlled character, in her most tightly controlled moments, is exercising the self-discipline because there's something going on that's driving her, something that she desperately wants.
Never again to be ordered around!
So you see where this is all going. She didn't get an agent, she didn't get any parts, and within a year or so of graduating from drama school, she had enrolled in law school. So my question now is, why did they let her do this? I know that the faculty must have seen her choices, had seen her audition piece before she ever did it. And what about the directing students? Nobody took her aside and said, this isn't going to work. Now, I know she bears a large portion of the responsibility for this herself because her choices were a bit self-serving, self-flattering, because they had been played in the movie version by these women who are known to be very charismatic, very compelling, Ashley Judd and Glenn Close, and also leading ladies. And she had never gotten the leading parts. My acquaintance at drama school, she got supporting parts. She didn't choose scenes that reflected who she was at that time or how she was being cast at that time. She was trying to dream herself into a certain kind of career. The second audition story is a little bit happier than the first. So an acquaintance of mine, a friend of mine, was graduating from high school and she was applying to theater programs. One of the programs she was applying to was NYU Tisch School of the Arts. And at that time, you could apply to both the musical theater program and the regular acting program at the same time. What you did was you brought 2 songs and 2 monologues. And if you didn't get into the musical theater program, you could maybe get into the regular acting program. So this acquaintance of mine, this friend of mine, came to me and said, hey, you got any suggestions? And I won't talk about the monologues today, but I will talk about the songs, because I think it's instructive. I asked her, well, what have people been casting you in lately, casting you as? And she said, well, I played the beauty school dropout in Greece, and I played Cecily in The Importance of Being Earnest.
I love you, Cecily. Will you marry me?
Of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
The last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
And she said some other things, but I can't remember what they were. And so I thought, and I said, so, like the quirky best friend? And she went, yeah. She wasn't thrilled by it, but that's how she had been cast, like her senior year in high school. And I said, stick with that. If you want to change how people perceive you, worry about that later. But doing this audition, stick to the way people have been seeing you right now. And I recommended 2 songs. First, Mira from the old 1960s musical Carnival.
I come from the town of Mira, beyond the bridges of St. Clair.
Mira is sung by Lily, a very, very innocent and sheltered young woman who finds herself a refugee in Central Europe in the weeks and months following the end of World War II. Very luckily for her, she falls in with a traveling circus, but they are just about to throw her out because she's more or less useless to a circus. Then she becomes a part of a puppet act, and the puppet act becomes a huge success. Here's another clip. You might recognize this singer. Okay, so the straight-up text of Mira is just that this young woman is homesick for her hometown, and she describes all the ways that this town is wonderful and unique and how much she loved it, which, really isn't enough for an audition situation. Safe and comfortable people can feel homesick. And then even the great Anne Hathaway, if you go and find that full clip of her singing the song, isn't really putting in, as many layers as I would hope that she would. No offense, Miss Hathaway, I think you're a genius. So the text is one thing, then there's the subtext, all the other things that are going on underneath. What is going on underneath in Mira? Well, one, just the plain geopolitical situation. This is post-war Europe. That is a terrible time to be a young and pretty, very naive war refugee. Look, it's never a good idea to be a pretty and young war refugee. In some sense, in a very real sense, this could be a life or death situation for this young woman. If she doesn't keep this job with this traveling circus, she could be out on the street and dead by morning. But you can't go around being the sad and lonely person at this job, a Debbie Downer about the whole thing. She has to put on top of it this feeling of the sense of being happy and normal. And I'm a great person to have around. Oh, no, I'm not crying all the time in my sleep. No, I'm a normal, bright, happy, competent person that you want to have around. And, we've all applied for jobs. You know how you have to put on a kind of a false face for that. So those two things, or you might say three things, are plenty for an audition situation. It's homesickness and fear that she is trying to hide by being bright and cheerful. Fear that you're trying to hide. So that was the first song I recommended, Mira. The second song I recommended was Touch It, Touch It, Touch Me from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Touch It, Touch It, Touch Me is a song by Janet, a very conservative young woman who comes from a very conservative community, but then accidentally falls in with a group that is, shall we say, very much not conservative. And she likes what she sees. She wants one of them to teach her how to let go of all of her inhibitions. So when I recommended Touch It, Touch It, Touch Me to my friend, she thought about it and she said, I don't know if I would feel comfortable playing the sexy lady in this song. And I said, no, that's not what I'm suggesting you play. What you play is the very inhibited, straight-laced, conservative, and fearful young woman who is trying to break free from all of these inhibitions and discover what she's been missing in life. So there's two things right there. It's her fear and her embarrassment and the voice in her head of her preacher or her father or her mother, combined with her determination. And it takes some real determination to change your life this way, to figure it out, to understand, how do I put this in the most positive way possible, to understand those aspects of her sexuality that she feels have been unjustly withheld from her. How's that for a politically correct reading of the Rocky Horror Picture Show? The whole point of the song is she doesn't know how to be sexy. She's trying. She is figuring it out in front of us right now. And this gives you an opportunity to inject a little bit of humor into the song. Maybe she gets it wrong. Maybe it's funny. So when I explained to her how I saw these two songs, she understood immediately. She knew what those two little scenes were. One, a very conservative woman who was trying to learn how to be sexy. Two, a very frightened young woman who is trying to get a job. And in order to get this job, she has to hide all of her fear and pretend to be bright and cheerful. Her task on, the day of her audition had changed radically. Before, all she knew was that she had to go in there and somehow be the best that she had ever been under the worst possible circumstances you can imagine. Now her task was just be a storyteller. You've got these two characters and you're going to tell their story. And the way you do that is you present that they're feeling this one thing and underneath they're feeling this other thing. And the audience, the people who are watching will understand. They put it together in their head and your task is done. She wasn't going in to present herself as a star. She was going in to tell two little stories about these two characters. So, a few months later, where this is all headed, there she was outside my window at the crack of noon trying to wake me up, saying that she had gotten in. Now, what she got into was not the musical theater program. What she got into was the regular acting program. But I think, and of course I don't know, but I think her acting of the songs might have been the thing that tipped the balance in her favor.
Actually, the fortunate part of it is I can now hear voices through my eyes.
So let me try to restate this a little bit more abstractly so that we can perhaps come up with some general advice that everybody can use. 1, I chose songs for her. I recommended songs for her that fit the general stage presence that she had already developed, but which were different enough that she wasn't singing two songs and basically repeating the same performance. 2, both of these songs gave her a range to play. She wasn't demonstrating her versatility by doing one thing and then a second thing. She was demonstrating her versatility by being multifaceted in this part and being multifaceted in that part. 3, she avoided anything that might be seen as self-flattery or showboating. She wasn't singing, the big 11 o'clock number that the star sings. She wasn't doing anything that was placing her as a kind of, heir apparent to the major stars of the day. She was doing character work. They have plenty of people who just want to be alone in the spotlight, looking hot and being admired. 4, both of these songs can be played, or, even it's straight up in the text, that the character is scared in some way, nervous in some way. And the nervousness, the fear, is good for an audition situation because you're going to be nervous, you're going to be fearful. And if the character is feeling that way in whatever, monologue or song you're doing, then you can channel all that into your acting. I'm not done with monologues. I will keep coming back to them because they're so important in the audition process for certain kinds of auditions. But starting next week, I'm going to be moving on to scene work with multiple actors.
Truthful Parson Brown, living in a southern town, for doing good and talking good, he was known around. He had a most peculiar way of preaching on the Sabbath day, on an organ, soft and low. He would sing and play.
If I have to be me for the rest of my life, I think I will go crazy.